I'd like to get started introducing our next speaker. Hemant Mehta is the author of the book I Sold My Soul on eBay, in which he describes his experiences selling his soul on eBay and the aftermath thereof. He's also the author of the blog Friendly Atheist, which I'm sure you're all not at all familiar with. Things you might not know about Hemant is that he actually founded the University of Illinois at Chicago's SSA affiliate group, Students Without Religious Dogma, better known as SWORD. He is the president of the Foundation Beyond Belief. He used to be the chair of the Secular Student Alliance Board of Directors, and Hemant and I actually go way, way, way back because Hemant is the reason that I'm here today. When he became chair of the Board of Directors for the SSA, he had to give up his work on the SSA's newsletter, which we now call The Empirical, and they asked me to start taking over that project. And lo and behold, here we both are today. So I'm going to get out of the way and let you guys listen to Hemant Mehta.
All right. Can you guys hear me okay? No? Better? I'll try. We'll figure this out. Okay, so thank you, Liz. And thank you guys for coming back from lunch. So here's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about something that I'm not used to hearing at atheist and skeptic conferences. And it's not public education, because we talk about that all the time. Like, when it comes to science education, we are on top of that. Anytime you see a creationist trying to put creationism in a science classroom, or someone trying to put intelligent design in a science classroom, we know how to file the lawsuits, we know how to complain about it, we've done that all the time. I know we don't always win, but we're good about reacting to that. But it's not just science either, because we do it when it comes to history. If you guys remember in Texas, I think earlier this year, they changed the State Board of Education, changed the curriculum to include more about the Christian history of our nation, which is crazy, and they took out some really important stuff. And it's not just history either, because we do it in English class. Because in English class, we see people going after certain books, and they don't want you to read this and that. And we go after that because we want people to discuss hard material and good literature, because we are open to that conversation. What do all these things have in common? It's not that the religious right is always going after it. It's that, every time these public school education things happen, we're concerned not just because religion is creeping up on us, it's that it's stifling critical thinking. That's what we're interested in. We want this unfettered access to education. We don't want any religious groups, or anyone for that matter, getting in the way. Now, here's the thing. I've heard people give talks about banned books and creationism and science and even history, but I teach math. And we never talk about how math is getting stifled, because we have the same problem in math that we do all these other subjects. So we have people that are trying to stifle critical thinking in math education. And it's not the religious right. And I think that might be why we're not against it. But I think this is something we need to talk about, because we're skeptics and we want critical thinking and we want students thinking logically, and they're not doing it right now. So we're bad skeptics when it comes to math. So this is what I want to talk about. There are 4 problems with math education as we see it. Just FYI, I've been teaching math at a high school, 10th through 12th grade, for like 4 years now. I'm about to start my 5th year. It's a big public high school outside of Chicago. And I love my job. It's great. But these are problems that aren't specific to me. It's not specific to my school. These are problems that you see in the math education world. So, number 1, students aren't taught how to think mathematically. And we'll cover these one by one. What does that mean when they're not taught how to think mathematically? I'll give you a couple examples. There will be some equations up on there. Don't freak out. No one's testing you on this. It's all right. So, here's the idea. That shape has a name. Anyone know what it is? It's not a cone. That's correct. That thing is called a frustum. Here's the thing. If you look in any math book that covers this object and you want to calculate the volume, how much space is in there, this is what they will tell. Oh, by the way, this frustum has a radius at the top. It has a radius at the bottom. It has a height, whatever. Here's the equation they will give you in a book. And the only thing I want you to pay attention to is, if you're my students and you see that in a book, your first thought is, holy crap, there are a lot of letters. And second, what are they going to do? They're going to try to memorize that formula. Or if they're sneaky about it, they're going to sneak it into their calculator or their cell phone, whatever. But they're going to try to memorize that formula. They're not going to think about what's actually going on here. But if you're thinking mathematically, how do you calculate the volume of the green space? You think to yourself, oh, well, that's really just a big cone, which there's an easy volume formula for, and there's a small cone that's been taken off of it, so why don't I just take the big cone volume minus the small cone volume, and I have my answer. That's thinking mathematically. Here's another one that maybe you remember a little more. Find the distance between 2 points. Does anyone remember, like, when they were in school doing the distance formula? And this is the formula I have in my textbook. And it's scary, and that's the reaction you get. I know, I hate it too. But here's the thing. My students try to memorize that formula, and they always get it wrong because they confuse what's x and what's y. They confuse what's the minus and what's the plus. And here's what I'm trying to get them to do. Don't memorize that formula, because let me give you a formula that's easier, something that you know how to do, and try to use it to figure out this problem that you don't know how to do. Something they all know how to do is they know what Pythagorean theorem is, which is what? Good, you guys know that. Okay, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Well, look at that line there you're trying to find the distance for. What's the difference between the 3 and the 6? 3. The difference between the 2 and the 9? 7. Oh my God, you have a right triangle and you're trying to find the hypotenuse. That's a problem my kids can do, and they don't need to memorize that formula. But it's hard for a lot of them to think that way because no one's teaching them how to think mathematically. And that's a problem because the textbooks don't do it. By the way, I should point out, why am I talking to all of you about this? Because some of you may go into education, you may become a teacher. Some of you may go into education policy, or you may be the elected officials that have the power to change some of this. So take this back, and whatever you do, you want people to be thinking critically. So that's thinking mathematically, and they don't do enough of it. Number 2, most of the math we teach isn't relevant. And you guys know this all the time. Even if you like math, you've sat in a math classroom, and what do you ask? Like, when are we ever going to use this in life, right? So, and here's the thing. When a student asks me, when are we ever going to use this in life? As my friend Dan Meyer likes to say, that's a question that they ask not because they're concerned about their future. They're just bored with the present. So we got to find a way to make this stuff relevant to them. And here's one example. This is a real ACT question that I saw in one of my kids' books this year. During lunch, Juan likes to create triangles with straws. If he has a 3... Right there, by the way. I'm just going to stop. Juan likes to create triangles with straws. No, he doesn't. This will never happen. And I know what they're asking. They're asking if you know 2 sides of a triangle, can you figure out the restrictions on the 3rd side? That's the question they're asking. But they're right here. You read this and you're like, clearly I'm not going to use this in life because you can't even come up with a scenario when I need to know that. So here's the thing. Let me show you a clip. We'll see if this works. This is a way to try to make it more relevant, to give them something that's mathematical, but maybe they can actually connect to it a little more. So let's see if this... Oh, I'm going to do this really quick. This is one more example. Crazy math problem that deals with exponential growth. That's the equation in the book. And if you're a smart student, even if you're a smart student, what are you going to do? You say, oh, look, there are 5 variables in that problem. If you're really smart, you'll say, wait a minute, E's not a variable, E's a number. Okay, nerds. But there are 4 variables. And what's the problem asking? The problem's probably going to give me 3 of them and ask me to solve for the 4th one. So where are the 3 numbers? Oh, look, 4.6%, 250. Oh, wait, this is tricky. 36 is written in letters. I solved the problem here. And then you plug stuff in and you get the answer. No one learns anything about exponential growth here. They just know how to plug stuff in and spit out an answer. That's not relevant, and that's not thinking mathematically, which is sad because that's a really cool problem, and that's really interesting. How do you teach the same lesson but do it in a way that's more connected to them? Let's see if this works. Okay, that clip right there. If you were the math teacher, what can you ask regarding exponential growth regarding that clip? Yell it out. How many games did he have to play? Anything? Check that out. What else? What was the first bet? You actually heard the first bet in there. I know it's kind of hard to hear, but they did tell you what the first bet was. What else? Did each game double the same? Here's some ones I thought of too. What equation tells us how much money was made? Or let's extend that. If each game was 15 minutes, how long did they play? And does that even make sense? Can you really be at a bar with your friends for like 17 hours, if that's your answer? And if you're really having fun, if the double or nothing continues, how long would it take to buy a new house? Because now they got to put together a whole bunch of information and they got to figure that out. So just trying to connect it to something that makes it relevant for them. Here's one more example of that. Surface area of a sphere, because I've taught this and I hate teaching this, because all the textbook has is that formula. And they'll say surface area is 4 pi r squared, and every problem in the book says radius equals 3 inches. What's the surface area? What an amazing problem. If they're really tricky, they'll be like, the diameter is 10 feet. Oh my God, oh my God. So, but here's the thing. The kids don't know how to connect this stuff to why is this relevant? Where does that formula even come from? So here's what we did in my class. Well, when do you ever see a sphere in life? Well, one example is like an orange. I know it's not a perfect sphere, but it's a sphere they encounter. Well, let's do this. Let me give you some string and a ruler. Wrap the string around the sphere so you could figure out the circumference, because you're sophomores and you should be able to do that. So figure out the circumference, use that to find the radius. Now that you have the radius, use a compass and draw like 5 circles of that same radius. And now peel the orange, peel off that surface of the sphere, and see if you just take the peel and put it into the circles, how many circles can you fill up? And the kids are really, really good at that, because we want students to focus on understanding why all this works. So this is what my kids did. They were peeling the oranges, they're putting it inside of these circles, trying to figure out how many circles they can fill up. And this is one example of what the students did. It takes up a little of that 5th circle. The reason is there's some white space in those 4 circles. But if they did it right, guess how many circles they should be able to fill perfectly? 4, because the area of a circle is pi r squared. And there's 4 of them. If it works, it's really cool. And if they didn't, they can figure out what went wrong. Oh, the orange wasn't perfectly spherical. It's a game of just trying to find a way to make this stuff relevant for them instead of just being a formula. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, another problem with math. Standardized tests are horrible at gauging mathematical ability. And this is a huge problem. Before I was teaching at a high school, I taught for Kaplan, which is a test prep company, and I loved working for them. I'm not knocking them or any of those test prep companies. But when our job, when we're teaching for Kaplan, is to raise your test scores on the ACT and SAT, which I taught for a while. I even taught like the MCATs for med school and the LSATs for law school. I don't know why. But I taught all that stuff. And our entire job is to raise your scores, not to teach you math. And those things are not the same. So how do we get your score higher? Because none of these tests are testing how well you know math. They test how well you know how to take a test. So this is something I pulled from a website. These are 5 SAT multiple choice tips from a website. Plug in numbers when you can. Plug in the answer choices and kind of work backwards. Compare answer choices, because if 2 of them are the same, it's probably one of those. Keep track of what you're solving for so you always know where you're trying to get to. And know when to use your eyes. Know if a drawing is to scale or not to scale so you can't trust what you're seeing. Nowhere in there on the SAT multiple choice tips does it tell you, learn math. Because no one cares about that. And that's a problem. So here's an example of an SAT problem. Which of the following is equivalent to the square root of 45? That's a problem about simplifying radicals, which we teach in algebra. But if I'm teaching for Kaplan and I want kids to get this right, what do I have them do? Get out your calculators and type in square root of 45. You get some answer. Now, let's see, what's 5 square root of 3? Figure that out. Oh, that's not the same number. That one, not the same number. That one, oh, hey, it's the same number. You figured it out without knowing any math whatsoever. Like a monkey who knows how to work a calculator can do that problem. But a lot of students who are freaking out about the math can't, because this stuff isn't relevant. So let me give you a better example of a multiple choice question, one that actually makes you think. All right? So, which is the odd one out? I'm going to show you 5 pictures. As soon as you think you have the answer, scream it out. All right, so here we go.
2, 3,
Raise your hands, or stay silent for a second. Who says 1? Clap your hands. 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, so no, we don't have any consensus on what the answer is. Correct answer, it's not 5 because it's too small. Well, 5 is too small, 4 is green, 3 is a circle, 2 doesn't have a border, 1's the only one that doesn't have anything weird about it, so 1's the odd one out, which is kind of deep. It's the odd one out because there's nothing odd about it at all. That's heavy thinking. They would never ask you that on the SAT because that's way too much thinking. But isn't that a cool question, though, that you could kind of reason your way into eventually? They would never ask you that, though. Okay, so here's where I'm going with this. Schools, the problem with the SATs is that we ask kids these problems that don't require that they know math, and then public schools are being judged on how kids do on these tests that don't really even evaluate how well they know their math. So you can game the system by just saying, we're going to lower the standards. A pass rate, we'll just make the pass rate like a lower number and more kids pass. Hey, we win. Or we can teach to the test. Forget teaching them relevance about math. Just teach them how to plug stuff into their calculators. Creativity is stifled because if you can't answer A, B, C, D, or E, why am I bothering teaching you that? And all the other subjects that are so vital to a well-rounded education, completely ignored. And the problem is in a lot of states, the teachers' jobs and their raises are entirely tied to how kids do on these tests. That's a problem. Okay, so U.S. News and World Report, they rank schools based on these scores, and that's a real problem too. So students can graduate from really good schools, and they can do really well. They can get A's throughout high school in math and still not really know what they're doing in math, and that's a serious problem. Okay, one more thing. Another problem with math is math teachers don't always think critically or creatively because we're never taught how to do that. I've been through education school. It's, for the most part, a waste of time. Like, they didn't teach you anything that you probably couldn't figure out already. I learned more from reading math bloggers than I ever did going to grad school. So, here's the thing. And this is where it's really important for all of us as critical thinkers. Why is this so important? We want kids to reason their way through problems and learn how to reason their way through it. We want kids to learn how to test their hypotheses in any subject, not just math or science. We want them to learn how to think in different ways. When they're not sure how to approach a problem, try it a different way. And students need to learn how to question what they hear. That's stuff that we talk about in math all the time, but the textbooks never talk about it. Let me give you one more problem. Checkerboard. If you've seen this, keep your mouth shut. But how many dominoes would it take to fill the board? And that's a domino. There's 64 squares on the board. How many dominoes would it take to fill up that board? No overlaps and no domino piece sticking out. How many dominoes would you need? 32 is right. That's not a trick question. It's 32. It is 32. So here's a tougher question. What happens if you just take away 2 of the corner squares? Now there's 62 squares. I know you want to say 31, but the question is, if you had 31 dominoes, can you fill up that board? If the answer is yes, I want to know how you do it. And if the answer is no, I want proof that you can't do it. This is a problem that my kids can eventually figure out, and it's a great discussion to have in class, but it's one you're not going to see on any test anytime soon. For what it's worth, how do you prove this? Because we're running out of time here. Well, there's 32 black squares right now. There's only 30 red squares. A domino needs to cover a red square and a black square, so you can't do it. That's it. That's the whole reason. So here's what I've tried to do. Here's what I've tried to do to get my students to make this stuff more relevant to them, to think about math in different ways. I've given them more flexibility. I've given them the chance to create their own problems when we can do that. I've given them more essay questions to do on math tests instead of straight up calculations. Like, explain to me what you're doing. And this is what comes as a result of that, because again, this is what we all want. We want students, we don't want to teach them what to think, we want to teach them how to think. And I want them to be able to explain to me how to do something, even if it's not the way I would have done it. And one of my students created this, which I love. And when we did a whole unit on trigonometry, I said, go make your own problems. One kid made this entire picture of the plane from Lost crashing into a house. And then you can even see debris on the ground. It's amazing. And one kid just, hey, Angry Birds, that's parabolas, and we can figure stuff out with that. But those are really cool discussions that we can have in my class now. I'll give you one more thing, and then I'm just about done here. Here's a cool problem to lead a huge discussion in class. This is a grocery store. There's 2 lines to choose from for you to check out your groceries. Would you rather stand behind the line with the person with 14 groceries in her cart, or the line with 3, 5, 2, and 1, because there's 4 people in line, and that's how much stuff they want at their carts? Which line would you rather get into? We'll say the 3 line or the 19 line. Which one would you rather get into? 19. Just yell out, why the 19? I heard one transaction. Checkbooks. Yeah, if anyone has a checkbook, it's going to slow down that whole thing. So you want to also see, how are they paying for this stuff? And that's... Okay, so if you say 19, and raise your hand if you say 19. How many groceries would the person on the right need in that cart before you switch over to the other lane? That's a fun discussion to have in class, is all I'm getting at. Because this is stuff to think about. And not only that, how can you figure out mathematically how many groceries it would take before you switch the line? How do you figure that out? Because you can do it. You go to a grocery store, you bring a notepad and a pen and a stopwatch, and you time people getting their groceries. And eventually, and you can do it with other numbers too, eventually you end up with a graph that tells you how long you wait in line, and you can figure all this out. So, I'm not taking credit for that. I stole that from a math blogger. But again, that's some really cool stuff that you would never see in any textbook. Seth Godin wrote this book, Linchpin, and he talks about how broken our education system is. Being good at school is fine skill if you intend to do school forever. For the rest of us, being good at school is like being good at Frisbee. It's nice, but who cares? Unless your career involves homework, looking through textbooks for answers that someone already knows, complying with instructions, and regurgitating them. That's what we're teaching them. And that's not helpful, and we need to find a way to fix that. So, advice to all of you who may go into education or might have the influence to change some of this in the future. How do you get kids to think critically? Give them more open-ended questions. Let them explain stuff to you instead of just plugging and chugging numbers. Let their creativity run wild. Give them a chance to write their own problems or solve their own problems, and don't grade them just based on what your answer key says. And finally, be less helpful. Don't give them all the information they need to solve a problem. Let them figure out what they need, and maybe they can come to you if they get stuck somewhere. And if you don't do that, this is a real test, unfortunately. That's what happens. I'm going to leave you with one more clip, and then I'm out of here. This is a clip. I haven't figured out what to do with it yet, but I just think it's awesome. And again, this is something a math blogger pointed out. I want to do something with this clip. I don't know. I'd love to hear your ideas. There you go. Somewhere in there, there's an angle problem that I'd love to get some worksheet to or something. But cool. Thank you, guys.